Welcome to this module on debiasing our decisions, where I'll discuss biases and present some practical strategies to reduce biases in your own decisions. To begin with, and rather ironically, there's a phenomenon known as the bias blind spot. And to test how biased we are, in this study the researchers ran 3 separate investigations with similar setups. And essentially they asked the participants to rate their own susceptibility to biases compared to other people. And they found that the participants rated themselves as being less susceptible to biases compared to others. In other words, I don't think I'm very biased, but I think that all of you are very biased. And what should be concerning for those of us working in sport is the bias blind spot makes people vulnerable to other biases because we fail to acknowledge them and then we fail to correct them in our own thinking. So this is a serious problem and we need to do something about it. And in a survey we produced, which is currently being published, we found coaches and practitioners displayed overconfidence bias when we asked them to compare their own decision-making abilities against their peers. Essentially, we think that we are better than our peers when it comes to decision making. And overconfidence is a leading cause of poor decision making. It leads us to believing that we can predict the outcome of our decisions more accurately than we can in reality. When we're overconfident, we weigh our own information and our own experiences as more important than other people's, and it can cause us to overestimate our own abilities or chances of success. Now, overconfidence can cause you to ignore information which contradicts your decisions, and it's going to limit how much you use the expertise of those around you because you'll undervalue the information they have, which might have helped your own decision making. So biases do exist in sport, so let's understand where biases are most likely to impact our decisions. When we have a professional decision to make, we use 2 different operating systems in our brain. Our default system for most tasks is called System 1. It's faster and it's more efficient, but it's also more likely to result in poor decision making and decision making errors. On the other hand, we have System 2, which takes more time, so it's less efficient, but on the other hand, it's more reliable and it allows us to typically make more accurate and high quality decisions. Because System 1's quicker and we give much less time for analysis, it's our quick and sometimes routine decisions where we're more prone to falling foul of biased thinking. The risk-based approach to debiasing begins by us thinking about a future decision-making scenario. These can be routine decisions you make quickly, they can be daily decisions, they could be less frequent decisions. This approach can be tailored to any type of decision you're making, but it works better in your quick decision making. Next, we break down the decision into smaller parts and identify the situational risk factors which might lead to the biases impacting our decisions. And finally, we can then tailor specific strategies to reduce the risk of biases in these situations. Once we've identified a decision-making situation, we can use this table to identify the situational risks. For example, if you're a sports scientist reviewing the training load data from the first session of the day to help plan the loading for the second session, it's highly likely that you're going to be under time pressure, you're probably going to get interrupted, and there's probably going to be some contamination by other staff sharing their opinions before you've had a chance to view the data by yourself. Once the situational risks and biases have been detected, the final stage is to prepare an appropriate mitigation strategy. And one of the very challenging things with debiasing is that it's not very often only a single bias appears in a situation. It's more likely several biases cluster together at the same time. So it's much safer to use a broad approach of multiple strategies than trying to rely on any one strategy. Then you can create an individual decision journey for all your important daily decisions. So in this example for a sports scientist, I've identified all of the key daily decisions. I've identified the situational risk factors and the likely biases for each of those situations. And this is then be used to plan mitigating strategies to minimize the risk of those biases in advance. Okay, there's three take-home messages for this module on debiasing. Firstly, we tend to think we are less biased compared to other people, and we tend to think that we're better at making decisions. This can cause us to be overconfident in our own abilities. It can stop us searching for disconfirming information earlier than we should. It can cause us to ignore the information that contradicts our beliefs. And it can cause us to undervalue other people's opinions and not make the best use of their expertise. Secondly, when we make fast, often routine decisions, biases are more likely to impact our decision making. It's often very easy to spot the biases in other people, but it's very difficult for us to spot our own biases, especially in real time. So we need to step back and identify situations in advance where biases might impact our decision making. And finally, thinking about the decisions we make in advance allows us to take a risk-based approach to debiasing. It allows you to identify the routine quick decisions in advance. You can then identify the likely biases, and then you can plan mitigating strategies in advance to minimize these decision errors.